She did everything right. The room is quiet, not empty. There are things in it. Good things. The kind that took years to arrive. A cup of tea, still warm. A window with the evening in it. A small plant on the shelf that someone remembered to water. The soft sound of a house that has everything it needs and nothing left to ask for. She is sitting in it, this room, this evening, and she is fine. Not sad, not grateful. Something in between that doesn't really have a name. And that's the particular silence of a life that arrived exactly where it was supposed to. Everything you planned, everything you worked for, everything you said you wanted. It came. It's here, in this room, right now. And the evening is very quiet. Everything looks pretty normal from the outside. A life that went the way it was supposed to go. And it did. It really did. But inside, there's something that's hard to explain. Like the quiet got in somewhere it shouldn't be. She is not falling apart. It's not that dramatic. It is more subtle than that, which in some ways makes it harder to talk about. You can't point to it. You can't explain it at dinner. You just sit with it at the end of a day that went right, in a room that has everything, and notice that something is missing. Not missing like a lost thing, missing like a word on the tip of your tongue that won't quite come. She had everything, and the evening was very quiet. That's where this begins. And if you've ever caught yourself thinking, I should be happy, so why am I not? Then you already know what this feeling is. And if you've ever sat in a room like that, even for a moment, you'll know exactly what this is about. Here's the first thing worth knowing, and it's almost a comfort. The feeling fades. Not because something went wrong, not because you chose the wrong thing or wanted it too much or didn't appreciate it enough. It fades because we are built to let it fade. The same system inside us that allows us to feel joy is also designed to return us to a resting point, a kind of starting place. Not as punishment, as a feature. Because if every good thing stayed as good as the moment we first felt it, we'd stop noticing anything new. What was exciting would stay exciting and crowd out everything else. So we reset. Quietly. Automatically. Without asking permission. Which is either very reassuring or deeply annoying, depending on how you're feeling right now. There was a study years ago that followed people who had just won the lottery, people who, by any reasonable measure, should have been embarrassingly, permanently happy. Within a year, they had returned to roughly the same emotional place as before. Not miserable, not broken, just back. Which is either profound or depressing. Possibly both. Probably both. This isn't a failure of either group. It's the same system, working on both. So if this is true for everyone, if the fading is built in, why do we keep chasing? The easy answer is because we're wired to, and that's true. But I don't think that's the whole thing. I think the more interesting part is what the system does with that wiring. You know this feeling. You got the thing, you felt happy, and then you got used to it. And then the thing stopped feeling like the thing. And somewhere in that process, a new thing appeared on the horizon. Something just slightly out of reach. Maybe a better version. Maybe something that doesn't have a name yet. Just a shape somewhere ahead. This loop has no natural exit. Not because we're weak. Not because we want too much. But because the system around us, the one that tells us what to want and how to measure it, is designed to keep the loop moving. And the strange part, the part that brings people to that quiet room at the end of the day, thinking, I should be happy, is that the loop keeps going even when everything is going right. The things the system keeps offering are all the same kind of thing. External, countable, displayable. We'll come back to why that matters. Which brings us to the system. Every system has a vocabulary, a set of things it can see, measure, and reward. Money, titles, square footage, follower counts, stars, likes, the things you can count, compare, and display. These are the words the system knows. These are the things it can see, respond to, and celebrate. 125 years ago, an economist named Veblen noticed something uncomfortable. It's not enough to be wealthy, he said. The wealth has to be visible. The display is the point. The signal is the value. He called it conspicuous consumption, which is academic language for people have always been like this. There's something else at work here too. We measure ourselves against others, not against some abstract ideal, against actual people, the ones just slightly ahead of us in the dimension that matters most right now. This isn't a flaw. It's how social creatures have always navigated where they stand. Before, the comparison was manageable. The neighborhood, the people you actually knew, the few you could realistically see. What's new, the pool of comparison is now. Everyone, all at once, all showing you their best. Every achievement, every holiday, every version of a life that looks, from the outside, like it arrived exactly where it was supposed to. And the strange part is, you know it's curated. You know it's the highlight reel. And it still works. The comparison still lands. The system isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. The question is, what was it designed for? The system doesn't just reward what's visible. It teaches you, from the very beginning, which things count. Not through lectures, through everything around you. The subtle pause when you mention a job that doesn't have a clear title. The way a certain kind of success gets talked about at dinner, and a certain kind doesn't. The questions people ask when you're young. What do you want to be? Meaning, what role will you fill? What will you produce? What will others be able to see? The neighbor's new car that gets quietly noticed. The relative who asks about your salary before your happiness. The friend whose job title makes the table go a little quieter. None of this is a lesson that anyone sits down to teach. And yet, you learn it completely. What your family celebrates, what gets praised at school, What makes someone's face light up when you tell them your plans? And what makes them go quiet? By the time you're old enough to question any of it, the lesson is already complete. And then something interesting happened. Somewhere along the way, we noticed that things weren't making us happy the way we expected. So we started collecting experiences instead. Travel, restaurants, events, moments that couldn't sit on a shelf, but could still be shared. But here's what happened. Experiences came with price tags and photos and follower counts. We found a way to make meaning measurable. And I'm still not sure what to do with that. The pattern holds. Everything the system can see gets optimized. Everything it can't see gets something harder to describe than ignored. It gets left outside the vocabulary, not erased, just invisible. What are the things the system can't measure? The feeling of being truly seen by someone, not evaluated, not assessed, just seen. Doing work that matters to you, not to a metric. Being absorbed in something so fully that you forget to check the time. The particular weight of a conversation that actually goes somewhere. Being in the right place at the right moment and knowing it fully without needing to document it. The feeling after something hard that you chose to do, not the result, the feeling during. These aren't small things. These are the things that, when they're happening, make you feel like you're living inside your life, rather than managing it from the outside. Like the distance between you and the moment has finally closed. These things exist. They're real. They're what most people, if they're honest, are actually looking for. And I think, and this is the part I feel most certain about in this entire episode, that the system not having a word for them is not an accident. They're just not in the system's vocabulary. Everything you've been chasing can be counted. Everything you're looking for can't. There's a name for what happens next. When you reach the thing, the goal, the moment you've been working toward, and the feeling you expected isn't quite there. Or it's there, briefly, and then it fades. And somewhere just ahead of where you are, a new horizon appears. A new thing that, once you have it, will finally be enough. This isn't personal. Every system that rewards achievement is built this way, arrival-oriented, by design. The structure itself keeps you reaching. She got there. Every single thing the system said would make her happy. Promotion? Check. House? Check. Relationship? Check. Financial stability? Check. The particular car that signals arrival in her particular context? Check. And then one evening, the room was very quiet. The system isn't broken. It just wasn't built for what you're looking for. And here's the strange thing. The system runs on data, and the data itself knows. GDP explains roughly 20 to 25% of the differences in happiness across countries. A real number, a meaningful one. The system's best tool, its most reliable measure, accounts for about a quarter of what it's trying to optimize. There's a researcher named John Helliwell. He's been working on this data since 1990, 35 years. And he said something in an interview that I keep coming back to, that the variables that matter most for happiness are ones that economics didn't used to think were worth measuring. He wasn't angry about it. He just said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Which means 75 to 80% of what makes people happy is something the system has no word for. The system isn't failing. It's just working on the wrong problem. She solved the right problem. She just didn't know there was another one. She knew the system. She'd played it well. She'd won. And she was sitting here wondering why winning felt like this. The room was the same. The evening was the same. Everything had arrived exactly where it was supposed to. Which means the question isn't, what did she do wrong? The question is, what is she actually looking for? Here's where it gets interesting, because it turns out the thing she's looking for has a name. Actually, it has several names, and the people who named it were working in completely different centuries on completely different continents, and they all pointed at the same thing. Give me a few minutes. So, what is she looking for? Here's what's interesting about that. There are two ways of doing things. The kind where you do it for what you get, the reward, the recognition, the number at the end, and the kind where you do it because it's the thing you do, because something in you is engaged or connected or stretched. Everything the system can reward belongs to the first kind. The second kind, the system doesn't have a number for that. It can't put it on a ranking. It can't give you a title for it. It just happens. Or it doesn't, depending on something much harder to design. Someone studied this. They took children who loved drawing, genuinely loved it, drew constantly for no reason, and they started paying them for it. The children kept drawing, and then when the payment stopped, they drew less. The thing they loved had briefly become a job, and jobs feel different. Once you start measuring something for external reasons, the internal experience of it changes. The measurement itself changes what the thing feels like. 2,300 years ago, Aristotle had two different words for happiness, which is the kind of thing that makes you wonder, what have we been doing for 2,300 years? Hedonia, the feeling of happiness, the pleasure, the good moment, what we usually mean when we say the word. Eudaimonia, not a feeling, a way of living, flourishing. It doesn't translate well into English, which might be part of the problem. He wasn't against pleasure. He just knew it wasn't what people were actually looking for when they said they wanted to be happy. As he put it, wealth is merely useful as a means to something else. The system has had it backwards for 2,300 years. A psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps spent the rest of his life studying one question. Not the big political questions, not how systems fail. One question, quietly. Why do some people find meaning and some don't? He noticed something uncomfortable. And before I say what it is, it's worth saying that what he found is not an indictment of anyone, because the people he was looking at were doing exactly what the culture told them to do. They were trying. The people who chased happiness directly, who made it the goal, the destination, the thing to be optimized, they struggled. Not because they were naive, not because they wanted the wrong thing, because the thing they were chasing kept moving. And the people absorbed in something larger than themselves, a person, a cause, a work that mattered, happiness appeared quietly as a side effect. Happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue. As a byproduct of meaning, not a destination. Meaning doesn't show up in your account balance. That doesn't mean it isn't real. A psychologist with a name I'm going to attempt once and then we'll both move on, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, spent decades studying artists, surgeons, chess masters. One question: when are you happiest? The answer was strange. Not when they won, not when they finished, when they were in the middle, so absorbed they forgot themselves, forgot to check the time, forgot briefly that there was a self to check on at all. The deepest happiness isn't experienced when you receive something. It's experienced when you disappear into something. Flow often isn't even pleasant in the moment. The surgeon mid-operation isn't relaxed. The chess master isn't comfortable. But afterward, these are what people remember as the richest experiences of their lives. Not the trophies, the being in the middle of it. He noticed, by the way, that this sounded familiar, like something he'd read in Marcus Aurelius, like something from very old traditions. Which brings us to something interesting. He wasn't the first to notice. Csikszentmihalyi had spent decades in the data, thousands of people. And when he looked at what he'd found, that the deepest happiness appears when you stop managing your experience and start being in it, he recognized something. He'd seen this before. Not in a lab, in writing that was almost 2,000 years old. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world, an emperor, and he wrote in private, in notes he never intended anyone to read, that the things outside you cannot touch what's inside. He called it the inner citadel, the place circumstances cannot reach, that your relationship to what happens is always yours to choose, that circumstance was never the point. The Buddhists arrived at something close to the same place from a completely different direction, not through power or philosophy, but through sitting with suffering long enough to see its shape. What they found? The problem was never the experience itself. It was the grip. Non-attachment, which, when you first hear it, can sound like the coldest possible advice, like being told, care less, want less, feel less. That's not what they meant. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It means holding what you have a little more lightly. Not less, just freer. And the Taoists, following a third path entirely, through nature and silence and watching how water moves, found that happiness forced cannot be caught. Wu Wei, effortless action, not passive, not giving up, just moving with what is instead of against it, like a door that opens when you stop pushing. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3,000 years apart. Same answer. The interesting thing isn't whether they knew about each other. The interesting thing is the pattern. Wherever humans sat down and thought seriously enough about happiness, really seriously, over years, over lifetimes, they kept arriving at the same place. Not from pleasure, not from achievement, from relationship with experience itself. And none of them, not one, pointed towards something measurable. They called it different things. The Stoics, the Buddhists, the Taoists. But they were all pointing in the same direction. The byproduct keeps showing up in every tradition that looked long enough. Which means it's not a philosophy. It's a pattern. She's back in the room. Same lamp. Same objects. The amber light in the window is gone almost all the way now. Just a thin line of it left at the edge of the glass. The quiet is still there. The particular kind that settles in when an evening has nowhere left to go. Nothing has changed. The things are still there. The ones she worked for. The ones she chose. The ones that arrived exactly when they were supposed to. They're still there. But something in how she sits with the silence is slightly different. Not better, not resolved, just more spacious. Like she stopped waiting for the quiet to mean something is wrong. Her hands are in her lap, still, not reaching for anything. The system gave her a very specific map, and she followed it precisely. And here's the thing about that. You weren't wrong to want those things. The map was just missing some places. Happiness isn't missing. You've been looking for it in the only place the system taught you to look. She already knows this. Maybe she's always known. The room is still quiet. But quiet, it turns out, is not the same as empty. The quietest room isn't the emptiest one.